So with me today we've got Aidan and Gareth. What we want to chat about is donations tax, and just the reasons that people would look to make a donation and just what those consequences are. So maybe just to start off with, Gareth, what would qualify as a donation?
So there's two main types of donations that an individual can do. The first one a lot of people know about is, you're free to donate up to 100,000 Rand to any persons of your choice during any tax year, and that donation up to that 100,000 would actually be tax exempt. Then there's another donation you can make, whereby if there's a public benefit organization or an NGO that you would like to donate to, there you can donate up to 10% of your taxable earnings, so it's not necessarily Rand limited, and the difference there being that if that organization issues you a certificate, those donations are actually tax deductible.
Aidan, just on to what is donations tax, and maybe if you can just share who would be liable and at what stage for donations tax.
Yes, certainly. So donations tax is the tax applicable when donating an amount exceeding 100,000 Rand per annum. It is usually the responsibility of the donor to pay the donations tax, but should the donor fail to pay this over to SARS, SARS could hold the receiver of the donation liable for paying that tax bill.
What would be the implication if you made a donation to a family member?
So if you're making a donation, whether it be a vehicle, property or money, if the total value exceeds 100,000 Rand, you will still be liable for paying that 20% tax, donations tax over to SARS. But this is not to be confused with providing financial aid to a family member, as long as you're not supporting an extravagant lifestyle and just assisting them for their day-to-days.
So Gareth, after a donation has been made, what are your responsibilities? What are the reporting requirements from a SARS perspective? If you can maybe just run through that with us.
So there's actually an obligation on both the donator and the person receiving the funds to report that donation in their tax return. And it's important, particularly for the person receiving the donation, to actually record that as a donation receipt so that SARS doesn't interpret that as income and tax it accordingly.
And maybe one for you then, Aidan, following on from that, what are the consequences of not paying the donations tax?
You could face a late payment penalty. This penalty is usually calculated on the basis of the amount owed to SARS as well as the duration of the delayed payment. Additionally, SARS could charge interest on the tax owed to them.
Okay, so you don't want to mess around with SARS, basically. That's what it boils down to, as with most things. So Gareth, just maybe talk us through those special rules or benefits associated with charitable donations. If you can maybe expand a little bit on that for us.
First of all, make sure that the organization you're donating to is a registered PBO, a public benefit organization, or a NGO, non-profit organization. For that, there will be a registration number, and then any donations that you make to them, they would be able to issue you with a donation certificate. So that's a certificate, so it's under Section 18A, that states the value or the cash that was donated, which you can then include in your tax return to prove that it was a donation to that organization.
Okay, so you can't just make a donation to any arbitrary organization and try and claim it back.
No, not at all.
Registered.
Not at all.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And then, Aidan, the tax on these donations, when would the donor be liable for the tax?
So the donor will have to complete the IT 144 form, and the donations tax should not be paid later than the end of the following month of which the donation was made.
So it's payable quite quickly then.
Yes, and it doesn't form part of your regular annual tax return.
Okay. From a planning perspective, a tax planning perspective, a lot of people want to make donations to reduce their estate duty at some point down the line. Just maybe talk us through some of those strategies, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if it is staying, let's talk about within the family, from an estate planning side, so we're not talking about PBOs, often people will use the likes of a trust or donating money directly down to, say, children or grandchildren. So it's important to be aware of that 100,000 Rand cap. And remember, that is a total 100,000 Rand, not necessarily per like sort of per person that you're donating to. And if you do find that you have a sum larger than that, just make sure you're doing it over multiple tax years, rather than sort of doing it all in one hit.
Lastly, Aidan, just maybe around the tax compliance, if you could just talk us through that, please.
Firstly, it's important to know what the tax thresholds and exemptions are and just stick to that. As well as you need to report to SARS when you make a donation, as well as keep detailed records of the donation, as SARS may ask you later down the line about the nature of the donation and your relationship to the person who you've donated to, even if it's under the 100,000 Rand. And then lastly, just ensure that your tax returns are accurate, and as well as paying your donations tax on time.
It's clear that we need to keep our records clean, and we need to make sure that we compliant from a SARS perspective, and probably need to get some professional advice before deciding when and which assets to donate.